Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about the broken bone prophecy. And in general, we'll be talking about the idea of dualistic prophecies. We know what the context of Exodus 12 is. We've probably been looking over it over the past week, and we know that it's talking about that the Israelites are preparing to start the Exodus. They are preparing to leave, and they are waiting on the plague of the firstborn to take place. So therefore, they are being given the commands regarding the Passover, regarding how they are to perform this ritual, and also regarding the Feast of Unleavened. Now, there is a criterion given in Exodus 12, verse 46, that gets extra attention for some reason. And that verse states, "In one house he shall be eaten. You shall not cause to go forth from the house from the flesh toward outside, and you shall not break bone in him." So very clearly, this is one criterion of many being given to the Israelites on how to perform the Passover. The Passover was supposed to be eaten in the one house. It wasn't supposed to be taken out, and any of the remainder was supposed to be burnt up before morning. And of course, it also says, as we mentioned, that no bone is supposed to be broken in the Passover. And also, let's look earlier in the passage for another criterion that gets extra attention. Exodus 12, verse 5 says, "Flockling, complete, male, son of year he shall be to you. You shall take from the lambs and from the goats." Now, the particular criterion in that verse that gets extra attention is the word translated as complete in that verse. Of course, oftentimes it's translated as perfect, and perfect indeed could be a suitable translation for it. And so these two criteria get a lot of extra attention from the list of Passover criteria. There are a lot of different things that the lamb is supposed to be, and we've already read some of the list aside from those 2 points, aside from no bones being broken, and aside from it being a perfect lamb. It's supposed to be of the sheep or of the goats. It's supposed to be a yearling. It's supposed to be a son of year. So it's supposed to be a yearling male. And of course, there are other criteria as well. Now let's look toward the end of Exodus 12 for another example. In regard to partaking of the Passover, Exodus 12:43 says, "And Yahuwah said to Moses and Aaron, this enactment of the Passover, all son of foreigner shall not eat in him." And also at the end of verse 48, it says, "And all uncircumcised shall not eat in him." So not only are no bones supposed to be broken in the lamb when it is partaken of, whenever it is cooked and whenever it is eaten, but also no foreigner is supposed to partake of it. And of course, it does say that a sojourner is allowed to, if he is circumcised, he and his household. And it says that no uncircumcised one is supposed to partake. So any uncircumcised male is not allowed to partake of the Passover. So the criteria do not only include those 2 things. There is more to the Passover command than just those 2 points. But those 2 points, the fact that it's supposed to be a perfect or complete lamb and that it's not supposed to have any bones broken, have been isolated and focused upon while ignoring and rejecting the rest of it. And this process is what is called a dualistic or double prophecy. With a dualistic prophecy or these similar types of interpretations, basically a person takes one small little bit or multiple bits. So in this case, a person would take the bit about no bone being broken, and they'd take the bit about it's supposed to be perfect, isolate that from all of its context, isolate it even from the rest of the verse itself that they're extracting these from, and then say, these are actually prophecies that mean something or other that I want them to mean. And these are actually referring to some future event, or actually rather some past event that has already taken place, and that is being pieced together to say, look, there was a prophecy and the prophecy was fulfilled. Of course, looking at it structurally like that, especially if we do not have any stake in this matter, it's obvious that this mentality of a double prophecy or a dualistic interpretation is simply not legitimate whenever we're ripping it just completely out of the context and ripping apart parts of the verse that we don't want in there and just saying that it has some meaning that it clearly, plainly does not in that context. Obviously, it's not a legitimate, it's totally illegitimate way of interpreting things, but if we have a stake in it, there's probably going to be a way that someone is going to force it to make sense to them. So that's something to be aware of. This is something that doesn't just go on with later Christian teaching. It goes on in the New Testament itself. You can look at Matthew's chapter 1 and 2 for very, very clear examples of this very easily. Just fact check the references that are given for alleged prophecies that are supposedly being fulfilled. And it is very easy to see, if we don't have a stake in it, and if we haven't been thoroughly indoctrinated by the traditional interpretations, that this is not what's being talked about, that these are not supposed to be interpreted the way that the Gospel of Matthew is interpreting them. And so it goes beyond just these later teachings of later groups of people, later Christian beliefs. It goes well beyond that. It's even in the New Testament itself. And this goes on also in Judaism. In Judaism, they wouldn't call it a dualistic prophecy, but they use their methodology of interpreting the text, and they can even make things say that it's not supposed to be done, even though it says it's supposed to be done, or they can make things say that it is supposed to be done this way when it says it's not supposed to be. So they can completely just invert what the text says. They can rip things out of context and say that therefore it has some higher meaning. So this goes on in rabbinic Jewish practice as well. Obviously, this is not a legitimate way of looking at things. We need to beware these types of interpretations, this methodology. Obviously, this methodology is illegitimate, that the text is not just a tool for us to find ways to justify beliefs. That is not what is intended by the text. We should be looking at what the text says. We should be looking at it plainly. What does it plainly say? What is it supposed to mean? And what is the context for this passage? What does the passage at large say? And what other relevant passages might be related to this as well? Of course, when we're talking about Exodus 12, we can go through all of these different criteria, and we can recognize that it's supposed to be a male, son of year, perfect lamb, either from the sheep or from the goats. It's supposed to be one per household, and it's supposed to be, of course, no bones broken in the process. No uncircumcised shall eat of it, among the other criteria given. If we're looking at the actual whole passage, and if we're giving it an honest look, an honest interpretation, there is more to it than just looking at isolating the broken bone bit and saying that that's a prophecy. If it's a prophecy, if these criteria are supposed to be a prophecy, we should be looking at all the criteria. If the criteria genuinely are supposed to be taken in a prophetic sense, if it's supposed to be something that we are looking at and assessing, okay, did this event come to pass according to these criteria, we should be looking at all the criteria. We shouldn't just be isolating and say, oh, this event was prophesied of because we can tear apart little chunks and say that, therefore, this is a prophecy here, even though there's no indication of it being a prophecy. The text itself, the law itself, is not just a tool to use against people that we disagree with their beliefs. It's not just a tool to use to prop up our pre-existing beliefs. We should look at what the law says for what the law says. We should be actually looking at the text of the law and the actual context for the passages in the law. And so the Passover, Exodus 12, we need to recognize that there are other criteria. It's not just that the lamb is supposed to be perfect. It's not just that the lamb is supposed to have no bones broken. There is more to it than that. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos and make sure that you stay in touch so we can continue this conversation. Thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Peace.